You have to joyfully participate in the suffering of the world.
Your thoughts have a kind of Eastern flavor to them.
Well, I lived in Jersey my whole life.
I mean Eastern in terms of Asian, like Buddhist or Taoist.
Sun Tzu. I told you about him.
We have to stop now.
Amazing thing about snakes is that they reproduce spontaneously.
What do you mean?
They have both male and female sex organs. That's why somebody you don't trust, you call a snake. How can you trust a guy who can literally go fuck themselves?
Don't you think that expression will come from the Adam and Eve story? When the snake tempted Eve to bite the apple?
Hey, snakes were fucking themselves long before Adam and Eve showed up, T.
Happy heresies and welcome to the desert of the real. Nothing like hearing Tony Soprano and Paulie Walnuts make up shit. Lose themselves in fanciful narratives, the stories they tell themselves. They are a microcosm of humanity, it seems. An endless parade of lies and delusions, partly because of a propensity to settle for the safe, partly because of the propaganda of Yaldibaldi and his hating angels. What a sad little condition in this hell world, borrowing from Shoe on Head. Delusions and propaganda.
Mankind is poised midway between the gods and the beasts. That may have been true in Plotinus' time, but clearly we have fallen quite a bit since then.
Ever hear of the invisible gorilla study? Participants were instructed to watch a video of two basketball teams casually pass the ball around. The participants were told to count the number of passes. Midway through the video, a dude dressed as a gorilla walked through the game, stood in the middle, pounded his chest, and then exited. Later, study participants were asked, "But did you see the gorilla?" More than half the time, subjects missed the gorilla entirely. Repeated studies yielded the same results. What does this mean? It shows that meat sacks see what they want to see, obey to the point of blinding themselves, and are easily manipulated into a conventional story.
Christoph, let me ask you, why do you think that Truman has never come close to discovering the true nature of his world until now?
We accept the reality of the world with which we're presented. It's as simple as that.
Yet here at Aeon Byte, we tear the veil and get into the true story, or at least a more plausible alternative. We always see that damn invisible gorilla, even as others call us insane.
Do you know what crazy is? Crazy is majority rules. Yeah,
In this Eternal Now, it's no exception, as you'll get that genuine dope on the origins of Gnosticism, which by default means as well the origins of Christianity. And by more default, it means also understanding the power of myth that can exorcise from you the Pied Piping of this hell world.
Myths are clues to the spiritual potentialities of the human life.
What we're capable of knowing within.
Yes.
For this hologram-destroying task, we have my friend and favorite Bible scholar, Robert M. Price. Much of what he'll be sharing is found in his new book, Judaizing Jesus. Always love when the mighty Bible geek materializes at the virtual Alexandria. We're done being manipulated and told what story to believe. Paradoxically, the cure often involves creating our own fiction of sorts. So maybe Tony Soprano and Polly Walnuts are not so far off the gnosis. There's nothing wrong, as James True argues, with lying to ourselves for a while, mentally cosplaying in a fake-it-until-you-make-it therapy.
But I can't go back.
Don't know that you got a choice, son. No man can walk out on his own story.
As Bernardo Kastrup said in his recent interview with Michael Shermer, the mind's first directive is to deceive itself. In other words, we must create our own reality first, before we are able to confront the horror that is the unvarnished reality out there. As Richard Smalley said, Hermes is both the god of the mind and the god of tricks. In this age that belongs to him, we gotta find the real by playing the pretend for a while.
Is this all real? Or is it just happening inside my head?
Of course it's happening inside your head, Harry. Why should that mean that it's not real?
I know this may sound strange, but to lie ourselves to the truth, you must hold on to two important keys. 1. Fall into a nice fiction, as long as your goal is to touch those archetypal images. Embrace the gods, symbols, and astral legends that resonate with your soul. Personalize and interact with these energies to gradually both experience and transcend reality. This will eventually lead you to ecstatically experience the charged archetypes themselves. That is living your own myth. That is freedom.
Your own father said that artists use lies to tell the truth.
As the Gospel of Philip states, truth did not come into the world naked, but it came in types and images. The world will not receive truth in any other way. There is a rebirth and an image of rebirth. It is certainly necessary to be born again through the image. The image must rise again through the image.
My friends believed in me, but they need some kind of hero.
Then be a hero.
Oh, no. You don't understand. I'm not even supposed to be here.
That's right. You came a long way to find something that isn't out here.
2. Always keep in mind that your falling into a nice fiction is ultimately a form of self-knowledge. A labyrinth leading to your purposeful self, while sometimes wrapping traumatic memory into softer tales. Whether it's a conspiracy theory or some movement you know will become corrupt, like they all do, embrace, but never forget you're there to discover who you are below all the layers of programming and cultural conditioning. Simple as that. As William T. Vollmann wrote in the New York Times, as a corpus, the Gnostic scriptures are nearly incoherent, like a crowd of sages, mystics, and madmen all speaking at once. But always they call upon us to know ourselves.
I'm not here to tell you who you are.
I didn't ask you to tell me who I am.
I don't know who you are. I don't want to know. It's taken me all my life to find out who I am, and I am tired now. You hear what I'm saying?
This is your gospel. Self-knowledge is your gospel, and only you can write it. Nobody can write a better story than you, and it's time to realize this.
Jerry, just remember, it's not a lie if you believe it.
Ever hear the story of Kafka and the doll? At 40, Kafka, who never married and had no children, walked through the park in Berlin when he met a crying girl who had just lost her favorite doll. They both searched for the doll unsuccessfully. Kafka told her to meet him there the next day, and they would come back to look for her. The next day, after not finding the doll, Kafka gave the girl a letter, quote, written by the doll, saying, "Please don't cry. I took a trip to see the world. I will write to you about my adventures." Thus began a story that continued until the end of Kafka's life. During their meetings at the park, Kafka read the letters of the doll, carefully written with adventures and conversations that the girl found adorable. Finally, Kafka brought back the doll, he bought one, that had returned to Berlin. "It doesn't look like my doll at all," said the girl. Kafka handed her another letter in which the doll wrote, "My travels have changed me." The little girl hugged the new doll and brought her happily home. A year later, Kafka died. Decades later, the now adult girl found a letter inside the doll. In the tiny letter signed by Kafka, it was written, "Everything you love will probably be lost, but in the end, love will return in another way."
It's just like this wave washing over me again and again. It knocks me down, and when I try to stand up, it just comes for me again.
No, it won't.
How do you know?
But what is grief? If not love, persevering?
Of course, since Kafka was a modern Gnostic, as many scholars have contended, I would say there is another lesson to this story beyond the, quote, return of love. And that is that Kafka was simultaneously himself the doll and the little girl. He was in his own gospel and own myth, as nobody really has ever verified this story. But we do know that when we fall into a nice fiction, our own stories, we are everyone we meet, and our psyches will often fragment to survive the Archons of Hell world, and to create better than the creator gods and their Karens and Catamites in the establishment. Or maybe I'm just telling you a nice fiction. An invisible gorilla of sorts. Led us to our interview with Robert Price.
You're saying that humans need fantasies to make life bearable?
No. Humans need fantasy to be human. To be the place where the falling angel meets the rising ape.
With tooth fairies, hogfathers.
Yes. As practice, you have to start out learning to believe the little lies.
So we can believe the big ones?
Yes. Justice, mercy, duty, that sort of thing.
They're not the same at all.
You think so? Then take the universe and grind it down to the finest powder and sieve it through the finest sieve, and then show me one atom of justice, one molecule of mercy. And yet, you try to act as if there is some ideal order in the world, as if there is some rightness in the universe by which it may be judged.
But people have got to believe that. What's the point?
You need to believe in things that aren't true. How else can they become?
This is the Aeon Byte interview, and as always, it is a great pleasure to have the Bible geek himself, Robert M. Price, this time to discuss his latest book, Judaizing Jesus, but we will also cover some other cool topics as we always do. So, Bob, as I always ask when you come on Aeon Byte, how are things under the oppressive yoke of the Archons?
Well, I personally am not yet suffering from it, but it sure looks like they're in control, especially one of them being in the White House.
The obligatory comment, too. Yes, yes. These are some crazy times. And with us, we have definitely an Archon killer, Vance Sachi. Vance, how are you doing?
Where are they? Where are they? I'm going to go get them. I'm doing great. It's always great to have Bob here, and I'm really looking forward to this. And let's go.
Let's do this. Let's do this. Well, Bob, I wanted to start with sort of a general topic on Gnosticism, although some of these topics you do cover in Judaizing Jesus. Simply because the show has grown so much in 2021. I guess other people want to go out and fight those Archons and get over their oppressive yoke. So I've been doing some sort of general shows on touching on Gnosticism and the Gnostics. More will be coming in these dog days of summer and beyond. So I wanted to ask you, if somebody asked you, what are the origins of Gnosticism, what would you say to them?
I tend to go along with the older view that Gnosticism was a pre-Christian religion or type of religion. Of course, the name gnosis is Greek for knowledge. It has parallels over in India with Jnana yoga, the yoga of knowledge, same word. I mean, Greek and Sanskrit are related languages. And that's like non-dualist Vedanta Hinduism today, where knowledge of what you really are, namely that this Atman, this individuality is really Brahman. Because in Western Gnosticism, you have really the same idea that at least an elite group of human beings possess within them a divine spark, unsuspected except for the fact that they feel alienated, strangers in a strange land. Like, can I really be in a world where people watch sitcoms like the ones on TV? What is the matter with them or with me? And it's exactly like the Matrix, which was based intentionally on Gnosticism. There are wandering gurus, prophets, whatever, who are Gnostic revealers, seeking, sort of as Diogenes sought out a single honest man. In the same way, these people were on the lookout for folks who were dissatisfied with the world and even with conventional religion. Despite its good function and noble ideals, they knew that, as Jesus says about the rich young ruler, that he knew there was something more. Well, what is that? It's knowledge of your own divine nature, and the goal is to liberate it and to stop being reincarnated again and again on this treadmill of lives. Which you're going to have to do until you realize where you really belong. And once you do, your divine spark will return to the divine fullness, the pleroma, the fullness of light from whence it came. And the roots, this is already a kind of a complex notion, even in its most basic form. So where did it come from? And it looks like there are roots in Platonic philosophy, very definitely. even the idea of the demiurge creator, subordinate to the gods, comes right out of Plato. But the dualism of it, that matter is evil and spirit is good, seems to reflect Persian Zoroastrianism. And there were other mystical currents like Hermeticism, and especially in Hellenistic Egypt, with treasuring wisdom supposedly from Hermes Trismegistus, thrice great Hermes, and so forth. And Gnosticism shares important elements with these notions, and they seem to be older than attested Gnosticism. So it's a good inference that they are the sources of it. Though it may come from India, because it is very much like non-dualist Hinduism and Mahayana Buddhism. I mean, also Jainism and Samkhya Hinduism. So it's hard to tell, but it gathers up a lot of things from very old religious philosophical systems, and it seems to have been an item in Judaism before Christianity inherited it, because there are Gnostic texts like the three stellae of Seth and others that are Sethian Gnosticism, that are they're based on Genesis, with Cain, Abel, and Seth symbolizing different types of humans and so forth. It's a lot of baggage if you're just coming up with a Christian heresy. It seems like it must have been some variety of sectarian Judaism, and that that some of them became Christians too, but didn't give up their basic theological framework, or that there were Gnostic converts to Christianity, and redid it to acclimate themselves to like a kind of syncretism, to make themselves feel at home in what would otherwise be a new religion for them. There seem to have been Zoroastrian Gnostic Christians, like in the Apocalypse of Adam from Nag Hammadi, which is just straight Zoroastrianism until they tack on Jesus. And so it looks to me like, it was a pre-Christian thing with roots in the Far East, mystical stuff that continues to evolve today, like in Sufism and the Druze religion and so on. They're certainly Gnostic. So that's more than you wanted to know, probably, but it does have a bunch of ancient pedigrees.
Oh, that's a great answer, a great summary. Really appreciate it. What do you think of this model that some scholars have proposed? And again, as you always say in the Bible Geek, at the end of the day, we're just speculating.
Yeah.
But until we get a time machine, a TARDIS, but that there were once upon a time disenfranchised Jews, Hellenized Jews, perhaps in Alexandria, and they started mingling with sort of out-of-work Egyptian priests, because in the Greco-Roman world, that was the people were losing their contact with the Egyptian mysteries, and these Jews interacted with them and started their own lodges, and eventually evolved into Gnosticism.
Could well be true, because from what we're told about the Naassenes, it kind of looks like they had their own logos theology that strangely anticipated Kant's religion within the limits of reason alone, when he kind of demythologizes the Christian story, like the incarnation has to do with every human being having a spirit encased in flesh. The resurrection is the freeing of the spirit from the impediments of the body and so on, and this they also call the Son of Man, and I believe it was Gordon Rylance who made an interesting analysis of this, where he said, look, this is so much like Philo and other things going on over in Hellenistic Egypt that it looks like that's where at least Johannine Christology came from, but maybe the whole shooting match, and that would make a lot of sense. Chaim Maccabee had a different Egyptian origin theory about Gnosticism, that it was the result of Hellenistic, whoever you envision, they're Ptolemaic Macedonians or Hellenite or very Greeks, whatever, who were very interested in Judaism, as a lot of Gentiles were in the Mediterranean world. And they flirted with conversion to it, but then somehow were convinced, no, what am I thinking? This is just a lot of gibberish. It might be that it was reading, like I think, what was it, Mark Twain or somebody said, a great way of making atheists is to get people to read the Bible. Well, that may be what happened, because Maccabee suggested that could be why you have all these weird versions of the Garden of Eden story and the testimony of truth and the hypostasis of the Archons and the Apocryphon of John. It almost sounds like they're satires of Genesis, and it may be that these guys were kind of like today's obsessive atheists who can't just drop the thing, the religion they once held. They have to beat it to death with polemics and so on. Could be, I don't know. But there are people that say Christianity started in Egypt, not in like among the Therapeutae that Philo mentions, and that it made its way across the Sinai Peninsula into Judaism, where many embraced it, and that Christianity, blossomed forth from there. It's not like, well, in a way you can say there's a paucity of evidence in that it's not clear how to connect the dots, but on the other hand, it's an embarrassment of riches because there are so many dots to connect. And so I don't know how this will ever be resolved, short of new discoveries that might somehow make it clearer. I'm not sure how they would, but at least as it stands now, you can't really be too sure.
Agreed. And again, well said. And as you write in your book, Judaizing Jesus, you talk about the Manichaeans and you say, quote, Manichaeanism is obviously post-Christian, 3rd century. Its version of the Redeemer myth clearly is based on the far more ancient Babylonian royal ideology represented in the Numa Elish. And you talk very cool. Well, for those who might not know, the Manichaeans have in their creation myth, there's the kingdom of light and darkness attacks, and the kingdom of light creates, like you talk about the Essenes, the primal man, and he gets destroyed and falls into creation. But you talk about the Manichaeans got this from the Numa Elish Babylon, but even maybe a very primordial myth where Marduk is the one who gets his ass kicked, right?
That's right. He goes out in battle against Tiamat and Apsu and the other dragons and monsters who are threatening the gods, and he makes a deal with them. He's the young warrior and storm god, just like Yahweh or Baal. He says, okay, you're not up to the challenge. I am, and I will take care of these monsters if you will agree to make me the new king of gods. And they said, well, yeah, that's fine. Go ahead. You'll deserve it if you can do that. And so he does mount this great battle against Tiamat. And it is not easily won. And in fact, in older versions of the story, because there are various texts that contain this, he is devoured by Tiamat at first, but then manages to fight his way out. And that is how he finally kills and butchers Tiamat to make the universe from her carcass. Well, that seems to be the origin of the Gnostic theme of the redeemed Redeemer, who goes out to try to gather the sparks of divine light by awakening those who possess them unknowingly. But he gets mired in the material world and forgets his own identity. And this is set out in the Hymn of the Pearl, a long poetic section in the Acts of Thomas. And then the gods send him a letter well, actually in the poem, it's the officials, his father, the king over in Persia, who sent him out. But it's like God sends him this revelation to remind him of who he is and what he must do. And so he does fulfill his mission and says, strips off the filthy garment of the flesh and returns to heaven. Well, that appears to be already a half demythologized version of the Enuma Elish myth. And it seems to underlie a lot of these Gnostic systems. Again, in the ancient church, they called Gnosticism the Hydra-headed heresy. And just like in Marvel Comics, cut off one head and two more shall take its place. This is this isn't my theorizing, by the way. It's Geo Wiedengren, a Swedish scholar who a lot of his work is somehow ignored in many quarters. He was well known in the Swedish and sometimes British myth and ritual school, that all this was connected with the royal ideology of the Middle Eastern kingdoms, including Israel, whose kings were believed to be the vicar of God and even an incarnation of Marduk, Yahweh, etc. on earth, and that he will undergo a ritual reenactment of the death and resurrection to renew his divine mandate for the next year. So this is an octopus with a lot of tentacles to it. And it does bring the basic myth of Gnosticism all the way back to the earliest Middle Eastern religion we know of.
Even in another parallel too, which I guess ties in with ancient Greece, is the cult of Orpheus. Didn't they have that myth where Dionysus is eaten by the Titans and Zeus zaps them, and then they both explode, and then the sparks fall into matter? I mean, it seems the Gnostics could have borrowed from that, unless the Orpheus was borrowing from Persia. You know what I mean? It's quite a labyrinth, but it's a valid myth too.
Oh yeah, and in like in Jainism and in Samkhya, which are almost the same thing theologically, they have a cosmogony that involves something very much like Genesis 1. In the beginning, there's just a kind of placid lake, and into it fall like raindrops these Purushas, these sort of soul fragments, and they begin to, it's also very much like the pre-Socratics. They begin to get the big lake churning, and the elements start coming together. The three gunas, they call them, the three modes of being, inert matter, energy and consciousness, and in different combinations they form all the different life forms and so on. Now that's got to be a philosophical version of a myth in the Rig Veda, where Purusha, as a proper name this time, is a cosmic giant, like the heavenly Adam of the Kabbalah. And he, at some point, sacrifices himself in heaven, and the different sundered portions of his body become different aspects of our reality. The gods, the four castes, the rituals, the material world, all these things are parts of the cosmic body of Purusha, the primal man. And this translates right over in the Indian versions of it. They're Gnostic too, because the way to attain salvation is to realize that your psychological selfhood, your ego self, whatever it is, it's assessed on personality tests, that is not the real you. It's just, as modern science says, an electrochemical process, material in nature ultimately. But it is given consciousness because energized by the Purushas, which are just like the sparks of light in Gnosticism. And it's like the human suffering is caused because the Purusha is like a battery in a flashlight, to use a modern analogy, which I think is perfect. If you don't have the battery, the flashlight is not going to illuminate anything. If you put the battery in and click it on, now you have consciousness, though it comes not from the flashlight, but from the battery. And what you are conscious of is the suffering of the world and how you don't belong in it. It's one continuous red flag, red light telling you, what is the matter? I got to get out of this. And then finally you meditate and learn to take the battery out of the flashlight. And the Jains say you reach omniscience then. And the Samkhya folks, pretty much the same sort of thing. But that's exactly like Gnosticism or the Buddha nature in Mahayana Buddhism. I mean, it's the same thing all over the place. And I'm not sure if that is Huxley's perennial philosophy or not, but it is a perennial philosophy. And that's exactly what Gnosticism was, and it has mythic roots. In fact, I always love pointing out to those who snicker at the idea of the saving crucifixion in heaven, not on earth. That's just what happens in the Rig Veda. The primal man, the son of man, is in heaven. There isn't even an earth yet when he sacrifices himself and brings life to everything. In Gnosticism, the Archons mug the primordial man of light, one of the ions, tear him to pieces and use the fragments of light that remain to vivify the mud pie creation of the demiurge. It's just nothing, just a bunch of clay pigeons till that happens. So what do we got there? A heavenly dismemberment of the man of light, which gives life to the world. Now, I see this as being historicized with Jesus of Nazareth, the supposedly historical incarnation of this. But he was only incarnated by being narratized. They created a life of Jesus by reapplying Old Testament passages and so forth, making them about Jesus. So I see it all over the ancient world, and it was ready to hand for another version to mutate into existence, namely Christianity.
Well said, and I would agree. And, we're talking about the Nassenes, and they were one of the few that actually referred themselves as Gnostics, with Marcellina, the Sethians calling themselves Gnostics, according to Irenaeus and Porphyry. But in the Nassenes one, it's interesting because in the myth, yes, I forgot the name of who the demiurge character is, but they create this. No, there's another name. I'll have to look it up. He doesn't appear. No, I'll look it up. It's a weird name, according to Hippolytus, anyway.
Mm-hmm.
But they create this again Mudman, but it gets the Son of Man so excited that he releases his bodily fluids, and the light comes in. And then you can parallel that to the Borborites and the idea of Pronicus or Barbelo getting the Archons excited so they expel their seminal fluids. Or in Manichaeanism, same thing happens. You get the Do you know the source of this sort of erotic idea of tricking the Archons or the heavens of releasing themselves?
I guess, it could just boil down to the idea that the seed of life must be implanted. The Archons, when they see the heavenly Eve, they're about to gang rape her, and stealing the myth of Apollo and
Daphne, right?
Where she saves herself by turning into a tree, which is not as erotically attractive to the Archons. But they in the what is it? One of the Nag Hammadi texts. The heavenly Eve escapes by creating a false, illusory duplicate of herself, which they mistake for her and gang rape her. Well, that's probably another way of saying how divine seed, which kind of goes back to the Stoics and so on, with the spermatikoi logoi, the seeds of reason, how intelligence entered into a world that shouldn't even have existed. Like that's a problem with Samkhya and Jainism too. Say, well, wait a second. If it's total confusion and ruination that happened because of the insemination of the lake of matter by the Purushas, how the heck did that happen? It's the problem of evil all over again. And in their case, they say, well, once you're enlightened, that too will vanish as part of the Maya, which is a pretty handy way out of it. This is kind of a theodicy, I would say. I mean, you can't, as a Gnostic, complain that the divine photons, as I like to call them, exist here in the matter that is you. You do want to extricate it, but if it weren't foreign matter, there'd be no chance of saving yourself and freeing yourself from the anxiety you feel here. So you have to explain how the mess came about. It couldn't have been the divine plan, but the fact that it happened as it did, and you're where you don't belong, creates the possibility of escaping it.
Yeah, indeed. Well said. And I was looking at Hippolytus, and it's the fiery solar god Esel Deus and his lords of chaos. Who knows? I don't think anybody knows where they got one. Then Yaldabaoth appears, but that's That's definitely another villain in the Gnostic saga. And Vance, do you have a question for Bob on Gnosticism? I know, like me, you listen to the Bible Geek, so I'm sure you've had many questions like me, walking around listening to Bob and like, I need to ask him that. Should I put it in the rain barrel?
I constantly try to think of good questions to submit to the Bible Geek, and I just don't have enough biblical knowledge. I mostly suck up the biblical knowledge, but I was going to ask about perennialism, Bob, and you brought it up. What's the most pure, ancient form of perennialism that we have? The idea that everyone's consciousness is one and so forth. Sounds like all these things are echoes of that, or somebody's trying to sit there and talk to their children, making up stories, which are now the myths, right? To try to get this concept across. But what's the earliest that you know of?
Oh, boy, that really gets nebulous when you factor the Hindu and Buddhist versions of it in there, because how far do those things go back? Like Sufism would be a good example, but we know that's not nearly as old as these other ones.
Right.
Was there a primordial version of it that lay behind even these? Presumably so, but it's also complicated by the fact that it may be a question not of dispersion, like it being passed down and spread around and so on, but it might be just a kind of structuralism, which envisions the fact that the human mind is the same basic mechanism the world over, because we're the same species. It would have to be the same. So the world, the environment is common enough with the problems of injustice and death and suffering and all of that, that sooner or later you're going to have the same questions arise in various cultures independently. And there's going to be the same range of options occurring in the different religions, like in Jodo Shinshu Buddhism, Pure Land Buddhism. The logic of that is almost exactly like Calvinism, involving predestination and total depravity and calling on the name of a savior in faith and being saved by his grace. But there's no reason to believe that it was borrowed from Christianity. You can trace the development of this school of Buddhism, and you see how one thing logically led to another, just as you can trace it from Augustine to Luther to Calvin and all of that. So there's an inner logic that will inevitably unfold. And so it may have come about in the same way, people observing the same sort of thing in terms of human capability and the challenges it has to meet. And eventually they come up with the same thing. So it's perennial just because people naturally came up with it. They all invented the wheel separately. And who knows when that started? I suspect that's lost in the mists of antiquity, or maybe I just don't know. I mean, maybe that is known, but not by me.
Yeah, I can see that. It's like looking in the mirror. Everybody sees a nose on their face when they look in the mirror.
Yeah.
Well, we could always do what Tertullian said, and Satan went into the past and planted all these ideas. With Christianity, we could blame Satan. Could it be Satan, as Bob says, the church lady?
Yeah.
Could be
I don't know.
alien.
Could it be Satan?
We could say it. We could just blame it on the aliens. We could go Jungian and say the collective unconscious.
Yeah.
But I also like in one discussion you years ago, you also mentioned very astutely Juan Culiano's work that this is the human mind is just binaries, and somebody will think of orthodoxy and somebody will say, no, this world sucks. There's got to be bad powers messing with us. I mean, it's just, it's the human condition.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's where I'm getting the dispersion versus structuralism thing. And even he said it's a little tough to tell the difference.
Indeed, fascinating questions. And I wanted to pivot a little to, another Gnostic revealer, if you would, Bob. His name is Jack Kirby. And you did an excellent article in your Patreon on him, and I highly suggest for you heretics out there, subscribe to Bob's Patreon, because he puts out his Thus Spake Zarathustra newsletter, which always, again, like our conversation, is a great place of content for comparative religion and pop culture and all that. And we recently, Bob, talked to Chris Knowles. We did a show on Jack Kirby and other people, and he covered amazing ground, as usually Chris does. But you go a little bit deeper, especially when it comes to the new gods. And you would say the new gods itself is a very Manichaean tale.
Oh yeah. You have this eternal warfare between apocalypse, which is just a huge industrial furnace of a world. It's so beautifully drawn with this planetary globe with various portholes around it with flame belching out of it. And it's run by a totalitarian regime headed by Darkseid. And there's some speculation that that may be the basis for Darth Vader. That and Doctor Doom combined, another Kirby creation. But at any rate, he is the head of this world of darkness, and it's really profound because his subjects are called the Hunger Dogs, and they're enslaved and oppressed. But eventually, given the chance to overthrow Darkseid, they don't want to do it. They'd rather be dependent on this guy and have security from this tyrant than have to handle the whole thing themselves, just like in the Grand Inquisitor. And then on the other hand, there is New Genesis, ruled by the benevolent High Father. And why new? Well, because this was originally planned to be for Marvel when Kirby was working there, and he was going to have Ragnarok happen. And so it starts out, there came a day when the old gods died, and you see a bunch of ruins, and conspicuously there is Thor's helmet in amid all the rubble. Well, the new gods were relative to the Norse and Greek gods. So it started over again, but in a dualistic way. And one thing I didn't happen to mention, I don't know if Kirby was aware of this or not, what Darkseid and High Father did to try to end the perpetual war was to exchange infant sons, each to be raised by the other as a kind of hostage, and as a way, I gather, to promote understanding between the two. Of course, that didn't work, and so High Father's son Orion becomes the dog of war. And even though he's raised in New Genesis, he's a fierce warrior, no peacenik. Whereas Scott Free, the escape artist, who's based on Jim Steranko, in fact, he becomes Mr. Miracle. He's in the prisons and torture chambers of Darkseid, and eventually finds a way to escape. And so the two messiahs kind of team up, the Christ and Antichrist, who switch places. What I say about Kirby maybe not knowing this, there was this book by a missionary, I don't remember his name, who worked in New Guinea somewhere, I think, and it was called Peace Child. And he said there actually was an arrangement like this between warring Samoan clans where they would exchange an infant for exactly these reasons. And so that, I don't know if Kirby just came up with the same thing or what, but it's one of many religious echoes in it. And so who are the new gods? Well, they seem to be ions on the one hand and archons on the other, with High Father as the unknowable father of Gnosticism and Dark Side as the demiurge. He's not said to have created the planet, but he does rule it, and he's sort of a negative god. He's exactly like Thanos in Marvel Comics, which was a later Marvel clone. I don't want to say ripoff, but it was like their version of Darkseid. And so he's like the demiurge. We have a part of the furniture of this fourth world, as they call it, is the source wall. That there is some great secret beyond the impenetrable source wall out in space someplace. And many have tried in a Promethean way to try to penetrate it, but it's impossible. And their corpses turned to stone now decorate the source wall. Well, this fits with Gnosticism because this is what's called the limit. At the rim of the pleroma, the world of light of the Father and his ions, you had the idea was sort of Neoplatonic. The Father emanated pairs of ions, and each pair begat the next pair. But at the end, there was only a single one emitted, and that was Sophia, the divine wisdom. Well, she wanted wisdom more than she had, and she desired to conceive in two senses. She wanted to continue the chain, and she wanted to understand what lay beyond the limit within the pleroma, and she couldn't. Well, she did have offspring, and that was the demiurge. What a big mistake. Well, he basically thought he was the ultimate God in his ignorance. And so he creates a world of matter, but it's dead, it's inert. And so he says, well, what's wrong here? What have I done wrong? He's not so wise. And they quote Isaiah. He says, I am God, there is none beside me. And Sophia laughs him to scorn and says, you got plenty to learn, buddy. And so he says, how can I vivify my creation? And there are two basic alternate versions of this. In one, the Archons, as I said, grab the man of light, one of the ions, tear him apart, at least get a lot of the light sparks in him, and use those as a kind of self-replicating DNA to create order and productivity among his creations. Not all of them, though. So there are some with the divine spark. They're called the pneumatikoi, the spiritual ones. There are some that are intelligent and, once it's available, religious people, Jews, pagans, ordinary Christians even.
The pew potatoes, don't you call them that?
The pew potatoes, yeah. And then there are just the louts, the pool hall rowdies, the sarkikoi or hylics, the carnal ones or the wooden heads. And there's your sitcom audience. And, Real Housewives of the Pleroma shows and all that. At any rate, that's why there are people that feel like strangers in a strange land. Well, according to the other version, Sophia is intrigued by what her son has created and looks down at what so far is, again, just this placid lake of matter, and sees her reflection in it as she's glowing with radiance. And the photons of her, of course, they didn't call it that, right? But the divine sparks of her light begin to germinate in the the lake, just like in these Hindu versions of the myth. But either way, divine light is trapped where it doesn't belong and starts everything churning, and it comes to life, and so on. And as a result, the primal man still exists, but he needs to grab what was lost to restore himself. And so he appears in the form of in human form as the Gnostic revealer. And to those who will listen, because they have the spark and they know there's something missing, they say, look, here's the truth. Let me tell you what, like in the Gospel of Thomas, he tells them, if you know your origin, you'll know your destiny, and so forth. So they, one by one, get converted, awakened. They're free from reincarnation, but they must have the knowledge of their true origin, nature, and destiny, or it's not going to happen. Now, apparently, this was like Shankara in non-dualist Vedanta, who taught that if you simply knew this truth, you would be, the shackles would fall away and you would enter the stage of enlightenment, experiencing your unsuspected union with Brahman. But of course, it's not that easy, because there are plenty of people that do understand it and don't experience that. So they began to come up with, in Vedanta, various exercises like the mantras and all that stuff to try to make it happen. Well, over in Gnosticism, they came up with various magic formulae that when you die, you're gonna have to ascend through the planetary spheres surrounding this world to get up to the pleroma. And it's like the Archons are manning these posts. They're really drawn from the old planetary gods.
Right.
And you've got to be able to evade them. And if you know the proper password, they'll say, okay, come on through. It's very much like in the Ascension of Isaiah, when Jesus is going to enter the world. As he goes from one sphere to the next, he takes on the bodily form of the entities in that sphere, finally taking on this diving suit of human flesh, which he gets rid of as he reascends when his mission is accomplished. Well, that's kind of what you're doing. You're managing. These guys are like guards on the Berlin Wall. But if you know the password, you can get over it and escape to freedom. And that, like Schmidthal says, that this is like a kind of superstitious, degraded version of Gnosticism. But what are you going to do? I mean, if you're not hitting Satori the minute you understand this, you could just say, well, I guess this is just one more bucket of bullshit. Or you could say, well, all right, there must be more to it. I just need to buckle down on this. And they did. And I have to think that's what's going on at Qumran, when we're told that they memorized the names of the angels. What the heck? Why? Well, because you're going to be meeting them on your ascent to heaven. As Bultmann said, Qumran is like a Jewish version of Gnosticism, the light and darkness, the spirit of truth versus the spirit of error, the astrology, and so on. I think that's probably correct. Oh, and back to the new gods, one last thing. So we got the source wall as being the limit, as they called it. Okay, well, the most interesting part of it to me is Metron, who Kirby based on Mr. Spock, actually. He admitted.
Oh, really?
That's why he looks the way he does with the aquiline nose and all that. And he rides the Mobius chair throughout the universe. And whoever sits in this chair is hooked up to the source of all knowledge. And so Metron is all wise. And occasionally they've had other people sit in the chair, Batman, Wally West, even Professor X in a Marvel crossover. That was
I remember now.
And so he's flying through the universe on this thing. Well, no one can tell me that Metron is not supposed to be Metatron, and who is like the angel of Yahweh, the lesser Yahweh, the exalted, transfigured Enoch, who knows everything because he's traveled the heavens. And what about the Mobius chair? Well, I don't need to tell you. That's the Merkavah, the throne chariot of Yahweh. Of course, Kirby must have known this. He was a Jew. I don't know if he was religious, but he must have known it. And holy mackerel, the stuff that is built into this, boy.
Yeah, it's incredible. It's a great essay. And I was for doing research for Chris Knowles' interview and your interview too, I was rereading Jeff Kripal's Mutants and Mystics. And he has a section, he does a heavy research on Kirby and all these other, comic
I got to read that. I've never seen it.
No, it's a good book. The occult side of comic book authors, individuals like Philip K. Dick, John Keel, the whole sci-fi high weirdness 70s and comic books and all that. I think you definitely enjoy it, but he is part of the group, and it's no secret that says how George Lucas ripped off or borrowed from Kirby for Star Wars. Like Mark Moonrider from Forever People is Luke Skywalker.
Oh.
There's a lot of evidence, Bob. And he has a section, he quotes a scholar who says that when Mark Hamill was first doing Star Wars and he walked into the set for the first time and he saw the guy dressed as Darth Vader, he goes, "What's Dr. Doom doing here?"
Yep, amen. Yeah, and how about in, I guess it's the third Star Wars flick, when Darth Vader is appealing to Luke to join him. He says, "If you only knew the power of the dark side," and the dark side of the Force and so on. That's okay by me. I don't regard stuff like that as plagiarism. I see it as somebody saying, "Hey, that is great. I bet I could do something interesting with that." Go ahead. It's not like it's copyrighted.
Yeah. And Lucas was an avid comic book reader, so that stuff is going to get soaked into you.
Oh, yeah. Oh, one other thing, Marcionism. That's not Gnosticism exactly, but it's sort of a cousin of it. The whole thing with Galactus and the Silver Surfer. This is like one of the several forms of Marcionism. Because Marcion taught that there were two gods. There was the stern, though not evil, creator God of the Bible, who gave the law to Moses and so on and so on. And there is the God of love and forgiveness, knowledge of whom was first revealed by Jesus, his son. And Jesus was not the son of the Old Testament God. And Jesus' death was a ransom paid to the Old Testament God to buy the freedom of his creatures, and so that they could be adopted as children of the Father of Jesus Christ. And he went along with it. By the way, I don't really know of any other theory that really explains why Jesus' saving death is called a ransom. It's an appropriate metaphor for this. I'm not sure if it works with anything else. But there was a version of it, of Marcionism, that said that Jesus was, in fact, the son of the Old Testament creator God.
Oh, really?
But he broke with him and died to save the creatures and slaves of the Old Testament God. Now you're talking about Galactus and the Silver Surfer. because Kirby did say off the record, Galactus is simply supposed to be God. And of course that implies that when he's sucking the life out of inhabited planets, that's like his demanding worship from all these little beings he's made, kind of like the crazy astronaut in that Twilight Zone episode.
Right.
So the surfer is sort of his son, his agent, and he has no compulsion, no qualms about handing over these planets he finds to Galactus to chow down on, until he sees humans up close and realizes, I can't be doing this. These people aren't just hors d'oeuvres. So he breaks with Galactus. And now this was totally changed when Stan Lee and John Buscema rebooted the Silver Surfer, and their version was terrific too. I love both of them. But as you recall, no doubt, he made it. What's his name? Can't think of it. The surfer. He lived on this planet Zen. And
I forget too. Yeah, I'm forgetting too his original name.
I'm going to see that. Well, he was about to have this planet absorbed and said, "Look, Galactus, I'll make a deal with you. You probably would rather have somebody else look up tasty worlds for you. I'll do it if you'll save my planet." And he said, "Okay." And so he become Norin Rad.
That's it. Yeah, you're right.
And so he makes this terrible bargain and sells out his conscience. That's very good. That's really great stuff. But in the Kirby original, we don't know what the Silver Surfer was. He apparently wasn't a member of any particular race. And he had no human feeling until it's awakened by seeing the humans up close. He develops a conscience and can no longer serve the God he once served. So he saves the human race with the help of the Watcher, who's sort of a deistic idea of God, but his power is reduced and he's now imprisoned on the earth. So I don't know if Kirby knew about this. It's pretty esoteric, even more than the Jewish mysticism, but he might have, because it sure sounds like this version of Marcionism.
Well, thank you, Bob, and good luck with Judaizing Jesus.
Thanks for having me on. Loads of fun as always.
Yeah, Bob.
I'll need it. Thank you, Vince and Miguel.
Have a good day. Thanks.
You too.
And there you have it, my beloved truth seekers. The first part of Bob's interview. The origins of Gnosticism and so much more. In our second part, we'll certainly continue talking about the Gnostic seer, Jack Kirby. We'll discuss, too, the liberating power of myth and why tapping into it means our very survival as a species. Bob gets Jungian, psychological, and sociological. We'll touch on the monomyth. We'll delve deeper into Bob's new book, Judaizing Jesus, that argues that the traditional image of Jesus being an observant temple Jew doesn't hold up. Instead, he was more of a Gnostic revealer, among other theories. This will lead us to talking about the Essenes, Paul, the Dead Sea Scrolls, and Simon Magus, all of whom might have been the first Christian church long before Orthodox Christianity. So please support to get the full and true New Testament. Only $6.99 a lunar cycle, or whatever you want to pledge on Patreon. Or you can now subscribe to the easy-to-use private RSS feed from Red Circle, found in the show notes, for less than $5 per month. and you'll get the last 200 shows in the podcast provider of your choice. And it takes Stripe, since many of you hate PayPal. No matter where you subscribe, it will cost you about $1 per episode, and that's a deal of many lifetimes. Membership to AB Prime or Patreon mid-levels includes full access to more than 500 quality shows. You'll get an invitation to the Inner Sanctum of Gnosis Facebook group and my Discord channel. Even support in the form of some shekel donations to PayPal or the US mail really helps. There is also a link on the show notes if you want to donate via Stripe now. I also have the merch store and an Amazon wish list if you want to help there. Finding Hermes is going strong. This program includes exclusive private meetings on exercises loyal to the ancient Gnostics and a monthly intimate Q&A. If you want to understand and experience Gnosticism in its full impact and liberating secrets, become an official citizen of the virtual Alexandria. We've recently done presentations on Gnostic non-dualism, vowel and sacramental Gnostic rituals, the secrets of the serpent Gnostics, and sex magic. Quite a variety, eh? Whew! I know this is a lot, but I gotta stay spread out, as the Archons are always there to cancel me. I'm also on Rockfin and Odyssey if crypto is your bag. If you need help with all of these choices, just message my ass. I'm always here to help, and I truly appreciate your help. Thanks for being here. Thanks for being yourself, your true self, here in the desert of the real. Hello and goodbye, as always.